The blood-spattered axe fell from Helgi Drakesson's hand, clattering against the wooden floor of the longhouse. He drew a ragged breath, scanning the carnage around him. Bodies of Saxons littered the ground, their blood seeping between the floorboards as his men continued to pillage the settlement. The raid had been successful, too successful. He felt nothing. Jarl Helgi, called Tormund, his second-in-command, holding up a sack of silver. The southern dogs had wealth hidden beneath their floor. Enough to please even Friar himself. Helgi nodded grimly. 10 years of raids along the Saxon coast, and each victory felt hollower than the last. The blood debt that drove him, the oath sworn over his father's mutilated body, remained unsatisfied. No amount of Saxon blood could fill the void left by his father's murder at Saxon hands. "Take what we can carry," Helgi commanded. "Burn the rest. Leave nothing for them to return to." As his warriors ransacked the settlement, Helgi stepped outside into the cool autumn air. The sea breeze carried the scent of smoke and salt. Their longships waited on the shore, dragon heads facing homeward to the fjords of their homeland. Another successful raid to add to his legend, Helgi the Merciless, they called him. The Saxon Slayer. Names that would earn him a place in Valhalla when his time came. But the gods knew the truth. The blood feud consumed him, leaving room for little else. At 30 winters, he remained unmarried, uninterested in the maidens who sought his attention. His clan needed an heir, but Helgi needed vengeance. It was all he had left. "There's another one," came a shout from behind a storehouse. "A woman." Helgi turned, watching as 2 of his men dragged a struggling figure into the open. Her long golden red hair caught the morning light, and though her face was smudged with dirt and ash, there was no mistaking her fierce beauty. She fought like a she-wolf, kicking and clawing at her captors until one struck her across the face, sending her sprawling. Something unfamiliar sparked in Helgi's chest, anger, but not at the Saxon. At his own man. "Enough," he commanded, stepping forward. "We fight warriors, not women." The woman looked up at him, hatred burning in eyes the color of a summer storm. Unlike the other villagers who cowered and begged, she glared defiantly, blood trickling from her split lip. "I am a warrior," she spat in broken Norse, surprising them all. "Kill me as you killed my people, Viking, or I swear by all that is holy I will be your doom." The men laughed, but Helgi did not. There was something in her eyes, not just hatred, but a cold, calculating intelligence. And how did a Saxon woman speak their tongue? "What is your name?" he asked. She lifted her chin. "Valka Brandersdottir." Helgi's blood froze. "You're not Saxon." "My mother was Saxon. My father was Brander the Far-Travelled, of the Raven clan." The name struck Helgi like a blow. The Raven clan, bitter rivals of his own wolf clan for generations, until a fragile peace had been negotiated 3 winters past. This woman was no Saxon thrall to be claimed or discarded. "Why are you here, among these Saxons?" he demanded. "My mother's people took me in when your kind murdered my father in a raid 5 winters ago," she said, rising slowly to her feet. "Now you've taken them too." Tormund stepped forward, his hand on his sword. "She's of the Raven clan, Helgi. We should kill her and be done with it. The peace with their clan is already strained." The old Helgi would have agreed without hesitation. A Raven clan member was still an enemy, peace or no peace. But something held him back. She had survived here, alone among foreigners, after losing everything to raiders like him. "No," Helgi said firmly. "She comes with us." "As your slave," she snarled. "As my prisoner," he corrected. "Until I decide what to do with you." As they led her toward the ships, Helgi felt the weight of his men's questioning gazes. Taking her meant complications with the fragile peace, with his own reputation. But leaving her meant certain death when neighboring Saxons discovered the raid. Why was he risking everything for a woman of the Raven clan? The blood feud that consumed his life left no room for mercy or hesitation. Yet here he stood, defying his own nature for a woman whose clan had been enemies of his people for generations. "The gods have strange plans," muttered Tormund beside him. Helgi watched as they secured her in his ship. "Indeed they do." 3 days at sea had done nothing to diminish Valka's fury. She sat in the prow of Helgi's ship, hands bound but head unbowed, watching the horizon for the first glimpse of the Norse coastline. Her hair whipped around her face like flames, and Helgi found himself watching her more often than was wise. "She's cursed," Tormund warned quietly as they stood at the steering oar. "A raven among wolves. No good will come of bringing her home." "Perhaps," Helgi conceded. "But my father taught me that true strength lies in how we treat our enemies, not just our friends." Tormund laughed bitterly. "Your father's mercy got him killed, Jarl." The words stung because they echoed the belief that had driven Helgi for a decade, that his father's attempt at peace with the Saxons had been weakness that led to his death. That mercy was a luxury warriors could not afford. That the only language enemies understood was blood. Yet that belief felt less certain with each passing day at sea. That night, as most of the crew slept, Helgi approached Valka with a water skin and dried meat. She accepted both without thanks, her eyes never leaving his face. "Why did you spare me?" she asked finally. "You're not Saxon. I'm something worse to you, Raven clan. Your men would have preferred I die." Helgi sat beside her, watching the stars. "My men don't lead." "I do." "And what does the great Jarl Helgi Drakesson gain by taking a Raven clan woman prisoner? Ransom? A bed slave?" His jaw tightened. "You insult my honor." "Honor?" She laughed bitterly. "What honor is there in burning villages and slaughtering innocents?" "The same honor your Saxon kin showed when they lured my father to a peace meeting and returned him in pieces," he growled. Something shifted in her expression. "What are you talking about?" 10 winters ago. The Saxon Lord Elfric invited my father to discuss trade. They tortured him for days before sending his body back to us in a cart. Valka's eyes widened. 10 winters ago, Lord Elfric was murdered by Vikings who came under the pretense of trade. My Saxon uncle was killed trying to defend him. They stared at each other in the darkness, the implications hanging between them. "You're lying," Helgi said, but doubt crept into his voice. "Why would I lie? I've already told you I hate you. I have nothing to gain by making up stories about a dead Saxon lord." Helgi stood abruptly. "Get some sleep. We reach home tomorrow, and the Althing will decide your fate." But as he walked away, uncertainty gnawed at him. For 10 years, he'd built his life around avenging his father. What if the foundation of that vengeance was built on shifting sand? The Drakesson settlement sprawled along a sheltered fjord, longhouses and workshops clustered beneath towering pine forests. Fishing boats dotted the harbor, and smoke rose from dozens of hearth fires. It was home, yet for the first time returning from a raid, Helgi felt no peace at the sight. Word of their arrival, and their unusual prisoner, spread quickly. By the time they reached the great hall, a crowd had gathered. Among them stood Jida, the Volva whose prophecies guided the clan. The ancient seeress stepped forward as Valka was led from the ship, her eyes widening as she looked between the prisoner and Helgi. "The wolf has brought the raven home," she murmured. "As was foretold." Helgi frowned. "What prophecy speaks of this, Jida?" But the old woman merely smiled her cryptic smile. "Bring her to the hall. The gods have woven your threads together for a purpose." Valka walked with her head high despite the stares and muttered curses from the villagers. The Raven clan had been their enemies for generations, long before the current fragile peace. Inside the great hall, Helgi's uncle Eirik waited. As acting leader during Helgi's raids, the elder man had kept the settlement prosperous. But his ambition was no secret. He had coveted Helgi's father's position before him. "Nephew," Eirik greeted coldly. "I see you've brought trouble home with you." "She is Valka Brandersdottir, of the Raven clan," Helgi announced to the gathered elders. "Found living among Saxons. I brought her here until we decide what to do." Eirik's eyes narrowed. "The decision is simple. Return her to her clan and maintain the peace, or keep her as a thrall. Though I question the wisdom of either choice." Before Helgi could respond, a horn sounded from the watchtower. Moments later, a warrior burst through the doors. "Raiders," he gasped. 3 ships bearing down on the eastern shore. "They fly Saxon colors." The hall erupted in chaos as warriors rushed for weapons. Helgi turned to Tormund. "Get the women and children to the forest shelter. Everyone else, prepare to defend the settlement." As the hall emptied, Helgi found himself alone with Valka. To his surprise, she stepped forward. "Let me fight." He laughed bitterly. "So you can turn on us at the first opportunity." "They're Saxons," she said, her eyes hard. "The same ones who've been raiding these coasts for months. My village was the first they destroyed before you arrived." Helgi stared in disbelief. "What? Why do you think I was the only survivor? I'd been hunting in the forest when they came. They killed everyone, including my Saxon family, and left. When I returned, I was burying the dead when your ships appeared." The realization hit him like a war hammer. "You weren't running from us." "I was waiting for you," she admitted grimly. "I hoped you might be the instrument of my revenge." In that moment, looking into her storm-gray eyes burning with the same vengeance that had fueled him for a decade, Helgi recognized a kindred spirit. Without another word, he cut her bonds and handed her an axe. "Fight with us," he said, "and prove your worth." The battle raged along the eastern shoreline. The Saxon raiders, expecting an undefended settlement with most warriors away raiding, found instead a fierce welcome. Helgi led the defense, his axe rising and falling with deadly precision. And fighting at his side, to the astonishment of his warriors, was Valka. She moved like a Valkyrie, her borrowed axe cleaving Saxon shields and helmets. Her fighting style was neither purely Norse nor Saxon, but a deadly hybrid that caught enemies off guard. She saved Tormund's life when a Saxon nearly took him from behind, and the grizzled warrior nodded his reluctant thanks. As the tide of battle turned in their favor, Helgi found himself back-to-back with Valka, surrounded by 4 Saxons. "Not how I expected to die," she called over her shoulder, defending a wolf clan settlement. "You're not dying today," he grunted, parrying a sword thrust. "The gods have plans for you yet." Together they fought, moving as if they trained side by side for years. When the last Saxon fell, they stood panting, blood-spattered but alive, staring at each other with newfound respect. The remaining Saxon raiders retreated to their ships, pursued by Norse arrows. Cheers rose from the defenders, but Helgi's focus remained on Valka. She had proved herself a warrior, and more, she had willingly defended his people. That night, as the injured were tended and the dead prepared for burial, Helgi sought her out. She sat alone by a small fire, cleaning blood from her borrowed weapons. "My warriors speak highly of your courage," he said, sitting beside her. "Even Tormund admits you saved him." She smiled faintly. Perhaps he'll stop suggesting you kill me now. Why did you fight with us? Helgi asked. You could have escaped in the chaos. And gone where? She set down the axe. My Saxon family is dead. My Raven clan believes me dead. I have nowhere. Yet you chose to fight for your enemy's home. Valka looked at him steadily. Are you my enemy, Helgi Drakesson? Or are we both pawns in a larger game we don't understand? The question unsettled him. Since his father's death, the world had been clearly divided, allies and enemies. Yet this woman blurred those lines, challenging certainties he'd built his life upon. What you said about the Saxon raids, he began. If they killed your village before we arrived, then perhaps they're responsible for more than we know, she finished. Including what happened to your father. The possibility had been haunting him since their conversation on the ship. I need to know the truth. As do I, she agreed. But finding it may cost us both dearly. Something shifted between them in that moment, a fragile trust born of shared purpose. Not friendship, not yet, but no longer the enmity of strangers. Rest, he told her. Tomorrow we begin our search for answers. The following days brought unexpected change to the settlement. Though still technically a prisoner, Valka moved freely under Helgi's protection, earning grudging respect through her knowledge of herbs and healing. She tended wounded warriors with skill that rivaled their own healers, and shared techniques from her Saxon upbringing. Meanwhile, Helgi sent messengers to neighboring settlements, seeking information about the Saxon raiders. What they learned disturbed him deeply. 3 settlements raided in the past moon, he told Valka as they walked along the shore one evening. All blamed on different Norse clans. Turning Norse against Norse, she mused. While doing the same to the Saxons. My father wasn't the only Norse leader killed after peace talks with Saxons, Helgi continued. The same happened to Jarl Gunnar of the Elk clan. And to my father, Valka finished quietly. Brander was trying to establish a trading post with Saxon blessing when he was supposedly betrayed and killed. The pattern was becoming clear, and with it, a terrible suspicion. Someone wants the conflicts to continue, Helgi said grimly. Someone benefits from Norse and Saxon killing each other, and Norse clans fighting amongst themselves. But who profits from endless war? Valka asked. The answer came to him suddenly, pieces falling into place. Those who sell weapons to both sides. Those who take power when leaders fall. He stopped walking. My uncle trades extensively with Saxon weaponsmiths. Valka's eyes widened. You think, Eric, I think we need proof before making accusations, Helgi cut her off. But I know where to start looking. That night, while the settlement slept, they crept into Eric's private storehouse. Among barrels of grain and hides, they found a locked chest. Inside lay correspondence in Saxon script, which Valka translated with growing horror. These are communications with Saxon weapon merchants, she whispered. Arranging payments for raids. Coordinated attacks blamed on other parties. She looked up, face pale in the lantern light. There's a letter here about your father's peace mission. Eric arranged for Saxon mercenaries to ambush him. Helgi's world crumbled around him. 10 years of vengeance, built on a lie. Countless raids, lives taken, all to avenge a betrayal orchestrated by his own blood. And this, Valka continued, voice breaking. Instructions for the raid that killed my father. Signed by Eric, but made to look like Saxon treachery. They stared at each other, united in shock and grief. Bitter enemies bound together by the same betrayal. What will you do? She asked quietly. Helgi closed his eyes, the weight of truth crushing him. Justice must be served. But first, we need allies. The next morning, Helgi called a council meeting of all free men in the settlement. As was tradition, any who wished could speak and be heard. But before Helgi could present his evidence against Eirik, his uncle stepped forward. "My friends and kinsmen," Eirik began, "I bring grave concerns. Our Jarl has been bewitched by a Raven clan sorceress. He harbors her among us, gives her freedom, and now conspires with her in secret." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Eirik continued, "Last night, they broke into my private stores, no doubt planning some treachery against our clan." Helgi stepped forward. "We sought evidence of the real treachery that has poisoned our clan for years. Evidence I now hold." But before he could continue, warriors loyal to Eirik surrounded him and Valka, swords drawn. "Seize them both," Eirik commanded. "The Jarl is unfit to lead, bewitched by enemy magic. I claim leadership until his mind is restored." Tormund and several loyal warriors moved to Helgi's side, but they were outnumbered. Eirik had been planning this coup for years, placing his supporters in key positions. "There will be no bloodshed among kinsmen," Helgi declared, lowering his weapon. "I demand trial by combat to settle this matter, as is my right under our laws." Eirik smiled coldly. "I accept. But I name my champion, Bjorn Ironhand." He gestured to a massive warrior whose reputation for brutality was known throughout the northern lands. Helgi had faced many fearsome opponents, but even he knew Bjorn's strength was legendary. Still, he had no choice. "Tomorrow at midday," he agreed. As they were led away and confined to separate buildings, Valka caught his eye. In her gaze he read not defeat, but determination. Somehow, they would find a way. That night, as Helgi prepared himself for what might be his final battle, the door to his prison opened. Instead of a guard, Jida the Volva entered, her ancient eyes glittering in the darkness. "The threads of fate are tangled," she murmured. "But not yet cut." "What do you see, wise one?" Helgi asked. "The prophecy I spoke of. When wolf and raven join as one, old hatreds die and new life comes. Blood debt paid with truth, not steel, will make the broken homeland heal." She leaned closer. "Your father knew this prophecy. It's why he sought peace with Saxons and with the Raven clan. And Eirik knew it too," Helgi realized. "He feared a united people would diminish his power." Jida nodded. "The woman is the key. Together, your strengths become something new. Apart, you will fall." After she left, Helgi lay awake, turning her words over in his mind. When dawn broke, he knew what he had to do. The combat circle was drawn on the beach, with the entire settlement gathered to witness. Bjorn Ironhand stood ready, his massive axe gleaming in the midday sun. Eirik watched with barely concealed triumph. When Helgi was brought forward, he raised his voice to address the crowd. "Before this combat begins, I invoke my right to speak truth before the gods," he called. "And I call a witness, Valka Brandersdottir of the Raven clan." Eirik protested, but the ancient custom could not be denied. Valka was brought forward, her head high despite the jeers from Eirik's supporters. Together, they revealed what they had discovered, the letters, the pattern of betrayal, the manufactured conflicts that had kept Norse fighting Saxon and clan fighting clan. As proof, they presented Eirik's correspondence and trading records. "For 10 years, I've led raids to avenge my father," Helgi declared. "Only to discover his true killer has been beside me all along, whispering poison in my ear." The crowd's mood shifted, anger turning toward Eirik. Seeing his plan unraveling, Eirik drew his sword. "Enough! Bjorn, kill them both." The massive warrior hesitated, looking between Eirik and the evidence presented. "Your father was my shield brother," Bjorn rumbled to Helgi. "If what you say is true." "It is," came a new voice. All turned to see a small fleet of ships approaching the shore, bearing the raven banner of Valka's clan. At their head stood a grey-bearded man whose resemblance to Valka was unmistakable. "I am Hakon, Jarl of the Raven clan, and uncle to Valka Brandersdottir. We received your message, Helgi Drakesson, and bring our own evidence of Eirik's treachery against our people." Seeing his schemes exposed before both clans, Eirik made a desperate lunge for Valka, dagger drawn. But Helgi was faster. His sword met Eirik's with a clash that rang across the beach. The combat circle forgotten, uncle and nephew fought with all the fury of betrayal and vengeance. Despite his age, Eirik was cunning and vicious. He scored a deep cut across Helgi's ribs, drawing first blood. But Helgi had been forged in a decade of raiding, his skills honed against the most dangerous opponents. "You destroyed everything," Helgi growled as their blades locked. "The peace my father worked for. The alliance that could have protected all our people. Peace is for the weak," Eirik spat. "War made us rich, made me rich. And now it ends you," Helgi replied, before driving his sword through his uncle's heart. As Eirik fell, a strange quiet settled over the beach. Generations of hatred and suspicion hung in the balance as Wolf and Raven clan members stood together, witnessing justice served. Helgi stepped forward, blood streaming from his wounds, and extended his hand to Hakon of the Raven clan. "My father sought peace between our people. I would honor his memory by completing what he began." Hakon clasped his arm. "My brother Brander died seeking the same vision. Perhaps their deaths need not have been in vain." In that moment, watching the leaders of ancient enemy clans clasp arms, Valka felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She stepped forward, standing between her uncle and the man who had begun as her captor but had become something else entirely. "The Volva speaks of a prophecy," she said clearly. "Of Wolf and Raven joining to heal old wounds. Perhaps it is time we listen to the wisdom of the gods." The autumn feast celebrated not only the harvest, but a new beginning. In the great hall of the Wolf clan, members of both clans sat side by side for the first time in living memory. At the high table, Helgi sat beside Valka, their shoulders occasionally touching as they shared mead and laughter. 3 months had passed since Eirik's death. In that time, messengers had been sent to Saxon shores, carrying evidence of the manipulation that had fueled years of conflict. Tentative peace talks had begun, with both Valka and Helgi serving as intermediaries, their unique backgrounds bridging cultural divides. The settlement flourished under the alliance. Raven clan members brought new trading connections and crafting techniques, while the Wolf clan offered protection and shipbuilding expertise. Together, they began building a future neither could have imagined separately. As the feast wound down, Helgi led Valka outside. Northern lights danced across the sky, painting the fjord in ethereal colors. "My father would have loved to see this," Helgi said quietly. 2 enemy clans breaking bread together. The beginning of peace with the Saxons. "As would mine," Valka agreed. "They died for this dream. We live to fulfill it." Helgi turned to her. "And what of your dreams, Valka Brandersdottir? Now that vengeance has given way to peace." She studied him in the ghostly light. The fierce warrior who had captured her on a blood-soaked beach had transformed before her eyes, or perhaps she had simply learned to see beyond the armor he wore. "I dream of building something lasting," she admitted. "Not just between our clans, but—" She hesitated. "Between us," he finished softly. The question hung between them, fragile as frost. In answer, she reached for his hand. "The prophecy speaks of Wolf and Raven joining as one," she reminded him. "Who are we to defy the gods?" His laugh was low and warm. "I've defied them often enough. Perhaps it's time to heed their wisdom instead." Their kiss beneath the aurora was witnessed only by the ancient gods, a seal on a promise more binding than any formal oath. When they returned to the hall hand in hand, none who saw them seemed surprised. The vulva Jida merely smiled her knowing smile and nodded in satisfaction. Spring came early that year, as if the gods themselves blessed the union being celebrated. On the sacred island where both clans had traditionally honored their gods, a wedding unlike any before took place. Valka stood wrapped in a blue gown embroidered with ravens and wolves intertwined, her red gold hair crowned with spring flowers. Beside her, Helgi waited beneath an arch of spears, his eyes never leaving her face as she approached. Representatives from both clans stood witness, along with Saxon emissaries invited to demonstrate the new era of cooperation. The peace was fragile still, but growing stronger with each passing season. Hakon stepped forward to give his blessing as Valka's kinsman, placing her hand in Helgi's. "May the union of wolf and raven bring prosperity to all our people," he declared. The priestess bound their hands with a sacred cord, speaking the ancient words that would join them as husband and wife. "As your hands are bound together now, so your lives and spirits are joined in a union of love and trust. The bond of marriage is not formed by these cords, but by the vows you have made. May these promises be strong enough to hold the two of you together through the years." When Helgi spoke his vows, his voice carried across the gathered crowd. "I once sought only vengeance, until you showed me a better path. I pledged to walk that path beside you, in this life and into the next." Valka's eyes shimmered with emotion as she answered. "I came to you as enemy and prisoner, only to find my greatest ally. I pledge my strength to yours, my wisdom to yours, my heart to yours, until the last sunset." Their kiss sealed the vows, and cheers erupted from both clans. What had begun in blood and hatred had transformed into something neither could have imagined when first they met on that fateful beach. At the feast that followed, Jida approached the newlyweds, her ancient eyes bright with approval. "The prophecy fulfills itself," she murmured. "But the story is only beginning." Helgi raised an eyebrow. "What do you see for us, wise one?" The vulva smiled cryptically. "Children with the wisdom of ravens and the strength of wolves. Settlements where old enemies become new allies. A legacy that will outlive you both." Later that night, as they stood together looking out over the fjord, Valka leaned against her husband's shoulder. "Do you ever regret taking me prisoner that day?" Helgi laughed, drawing her closer. "It was the first true thing I'd done in 10 years, though I didn't know it then." He kissed her temple. "The gods work in strange ways." "Indeed they do," she agreed. "They gave me my greatest enemy to teach me about love. And they gave me a raven to heal a wolf's heart," he replied softly. Together they watched the stars emerge above the peaceful waters, leaders of a united people, architects of a new future, and proof that even the deepest hatreds could be transformed when truth and love prevailed.